August 31st, 1944. Somewhere in occupied France, German Field Marshal Walter Model studied a set of figures that should have ended the American advance by morning. 400 miles in 25 days. The numbers mocked every rule in the book. No mechanized army in history had ever maintained momentum beyond 150 miles from its supply base. Not without fuel, not without rest, not without disaster. Model's pencil traced Patton's line of advance like a surgeon marking the limits of survival. His staff waited in silence. "Gentlemen," he began, "Patton's army will stop itself within 72 hours, by mathematics alone." The confidence in his voice came from decades of German doctrine, precise, flawless, mechanical. Fuel consumption, maintenance intervals, driver fatigue. Every factor predicted the same outcome: collapse. But 400 miles away, in a muddy French field lit only by blackout lamps, American drivers were preparing to defy the laws of logistics themselves. No sleep schedules, no maintenance stops, no safety margins, just steel, caffeine, and willpower. Staff Sergeant William McBride, son of a Mississippi mechanic, tightened the straps on his helmet and muttered, "They said the war could be won or lost by how fast we drive." Nobody said a damn thing about stopping. Convoys stretched across the night horizon, thousands of trucks nose to tail, engines growling through darkness so thick even headlights were banned. Drivers followed faint lines of glowing paint on the truck ahead, 6 feet apart, one mistake away from a flaming pile of fuel drums. Each truck carried what the entire Third Army lived on: fuel, rations, shells, blood. Each driver knew that one breakdown could stall an entire division. To the Germans, it looked like chaos. To the Americans, it was organized madness, the only kind that could keep Patton's army alive. When word reached Model's headquarters that fuel depots were still being emptied faster than his analysts could calculate, he accused his staff of fabricating numbers. But reconnaissance flights told the truth. American convoys were moving without rest, without light, without logic, and somehow not stopping. What began as a desperate experiment would become the most dangerous, most reckless, and most effective supply operation in the history of modern war. The Red Ball Express had just come to life. Rogers knew exactly what his decision meant. Men would die from exhaustion. Engines would burn out. Accidents would claim more drivers than enemy fire. But the alternative, stopping Patton's advance to wait for fuel, meant losing the war's only window of momentum. He spread the road maps across his desk, lit only by a flickering lamp, and began sketching something no army manual had ever imagined: a one-way road system that never stopped moving. No convoys, no formations, no rest breaks, just an endless artery of trucks pulsing with fuel and ammunition. A highway built on speed, not safety. At dawn on September 3rd, the first engines roared to life. 6,000 trucks rolled into motion, each loaded with precious cargo: gasoline, rations, shells, blood. Staff Sergeant William McBride gripped the wheel of his GMC, a 2.5-ton beast stacked high with fuel cans. His orders were terrifyingly simple: don't stop until you reach Patton. The route stretched 400 miles across shattered French countryside, bridges half repaired, roads cratered from bombing. Dust clouds followed the convoys like ghosts. Drivers navigated using nothing but chalk arrows on signposts and memory. Rogers had done the impossible math: 12 out on 500 tons of supplies every day, one truck leaving every 30 seconds. If even a single vehicle hesitated, the chain collapsed. His solution? Eliminate hesitation altogether. The trucks would follow bumper to bumper, 6 feet apart, moving at 45 miles an hour, 20 hours a day. What began as a supply line became a machine, relentless, deafening, alive. Engines screamed, tires shredded, men drove until their hands blistered and their eyes burned. Sleep was replaced with Benzedrine pills and coffee thick enough to chew. Mechanics worked beside the road, fixing trucks while engines ran because stopping wasn't allowed. They called it the Red Ball Express, a code name borrowed from American railroads where Red Ball meant priority freight that never stopped. Only now, the freight was the fate of Patton's army. African-American drivers, men who wore segregated uniforms but carried equal burdens, made up nearly 3/4 of the operation. They worked the longest shifts, drove the worst routes, and earned the least credit. But on those blacked-out roads, every man was the same, just a silhouette behind a wheel, chasing the dim green glow of paint on the truck ahead. McBride's company, the 666th Quartermaster Truck Battalion, became legend before the month was over. They drove through bombardments, ambushes, and exhaustion that broke stronger men. "Sir," one driver told Rogers, "you can't scare a man who hasn't slept in 3 days." Accidents came in waves. Trucks flipped on sharp corners, brakes failed on descents, fuel drums exploded into fireballs that lit the night sky. But replacements kept rolling in. Rogers had turned American industry into a living organism. When a truck died, another took its place before the wreck cooled. To the Germans, it looked impossible. Luftwaffe reconnaissance pilots reported American convoys stretching from horizon to horizon. Thousands of trucks moving without formation or rest, faster than any logistics network in military history. Models analysts refused to believe. It cannot be sustained, one officer insisted. They are defying mathematics. He was right. They were. Because the Red Ball Express wasn't following equations. It was running on something harder to measure: willpower. By the second week, over 90% of Patton's supplies were arriving directly from Red Ball trucks. Fuel dumps that should have been empty stayed full. Frontline tanks that should have been dead in their tracks kept rolling. American logistics, the one thing German doctrine had trusted to fail, had become a weapon. Every night, engines echoed through the French dark like a heartbeat. Every morning, Patton's tanks moved further east, chasing a retreating enemy that couldn't understand how they were still moving at all. By mid-September, the Red Ball Express had become the most dangerous road system in Europe. 6,000 trucks thundered across France without pause, a river of steel and gasoline that never slept. But the faster they drove, the deadlier it became. Engines overheated, drivers collapsed, brakes caught fire on descents, some men died. At the wheel, hands still locked around the steering column when rescue teams found them. Rogers knew he was pushing his army past the limit of endurance, but there was no other choice. The only thing worse than losing men was losing momentum. Then came a new enemy. The Luftwaffe, desperate to cripple Patton's advance, began hunting the convoys from the air. German pilots called them the endless targets. Columns so long you could bomb one stretch and still see the next on the horizon. By September 15th, every night sky over France burned with tracer fire. Rogers faced an impossible choice: halt movement until daylight, or drive blind through enemy raids. He chose something neither side had ever tried: complete blackout driving. No headlights, no taillights, no interior lamps. Only faint lines of glowing paint brushed across truck tailgates, a ghostly trail leading through pitch-black countryside. The men called it driving by faith. Staff Sergeant McBride gritted, his teeth as the darkness closed in. He could see nothing but a weak green shimmer 6 feet ahead. One mistake, one heartbeat of hesitation, and 50 trucks behind him would plow into each other. Engines howled in the night, tires screeched, and yet somehow they kept moving. The blackout convoys became invisible, too fast and too dark for German aircraft to hit. Pilots circled above, dropping flares into empty fields, unable to find their targets. On the ground, the Red Ball roared forward unseen, an army of ghosts fueling an army of tanks. By late September, even the Luftwaffe gave up. The Red Ball had outlasted them through sheer defiance, but the cost was brutal. By October, 1 in 10 drivers had been injured or killed. Some trucks vanished entirely, no wreckage, no trace, swallowed by night and exhaustion. Others arrived at depots, covered in bullet holes, their drivers half-conscious from fatigue. Mechanics ran triage centers on the roadside, swapping engines in the dirt, working by touch and instinct. And still, the convoys rolled. The Germans couldn't comprehend it. To them, the Americans were wasting resources, trading efficiency for chaos. What they didn't see was that this chaos was efficiency, an adaptive, self-correcting machine driven by human will, not regulation. Every man on those trucks knew the truth. If the red ball stopped, Patton stopped. And if Patton stopped, the war dragged on. By October 16, 1944, after 43 relentless days, Patton's forces captured the fortress city of Metz, a stronghold that had resisted conquest for more than 16 centuries. When the German High Command demanded to know how the Americans sustained their advance, their own analysts could only reply, "They broke the rules." The Red Ball Express had moved more than 400,000 tons of supplies through bombed roads, rain, exhaustion, and fear, all without stopping once. It had beaten not just the Wehrmacht but the laws of probability themselves. Roger's final report filled only one page. No triumph, no decoration, just one line written in pencil across the bottom. It worked because they refused to stop. McBride received his discharge papers on November 20th, 1944. The document listed him as permanently disabled, exhaustion, nerve damage, and injuries sustained not under fire, but behind the wheel of a truck. His war had been fought on broken roads and sleepless nights with a steering wheel instead of a rifle. His final convoy had crossed into Germany itself, delivering the ammunition that fueled Patton's last surge. The mission that began as a mathematical impossibility had ended in a victory written in human cost, paid mile by mile, engine by engine, life by life. 4 days earlier, on November 16th, the Red Ball Express made its final run. The endless convoys that had once carved light through the night went silent. No horns, no engines, just the stillness of roads that had carried 400,000 tons of hope across a continent. German resistance had crumbled. There was nothing left to supply. When the war ended, even German analysts admitted what their equations never could. The Red Ball Express shouldn't have worked. By every rule, every regulation, every manual ever written, it should have collapsed in chaos. But it didn't. Because thousands of ordinary drivers decided that stopping wasn't an option. Their courage turned logistics into legend. Their exhaustion became victory. Their disobedience ended a war. And long after the engines cooled and the roads were reclaimed by silence, one truth remained. Sometimes the difference between what's possible and what's impossible is simply the will to keep going. So if you found this story worth remembering, don't just scroll past it. Hit subscribe, keep the history alive, and remind the world that even the smallest hands can drive the course of war.